Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Leader Campus Voices. My name is Mel Wildermuth. On the other end of our line is Barry Kinsey. He's FEMA National Continuity Trainer, and you were at one time the chief. Now you're a manager. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was the acting branch chief because our branch chief retired, so I took on that responsibility for a little while.
Oh, well, fantastic. Then you are the man in the knowledge of everything. Okay. So if I could call you Barry, that would be fine. I'm Mel, of course.
Yes.
The first question that I kind of have for you is dealing with the aspect of the hurricane just hit Doria,
Okay.
and the devastation that I saw made it just unbelievable. So after a hurricane like that hits, what is you're dealing with continuity? So what is the most important aspects of continuity and logistics to handle immediately?
Well, one of the most important things when it comes to continuity, and what we try to get people to understand is basically having a plan for anything, possibly anything that can happen, and that's really the gist of continuity, is having a plan, having something to do when you have, whether it be the worst case scenario or even just simple event. It could be a snow event, which causes people the inability to make it into work. You still have to provide a service, because when it comes to the federal government, we are the people, we the people and stuff, and we provide the service to the people of the United States. So when it comes to continuity, and particularly what I focus on, or what we focus on in the National Continuity Program, is the continuation of the federal government. That's under our Constitution. The three branches of government, we want to make sure that they still function as is. And particularly what people don't know is that really there's only one part of the federal government that falls under the National Continuity Program, and that's the administration portion of it. The judicial and congressional portion of it actually doesn't have to abide by it, but they do, because there's no other program out there. So pretty much all three branches of the federal government follow our guidelines.
So in a state of emergency then, I was looking at the FEMA link, or the website, and they were saying that the storm surges are the most problematic for people, that there's very little ways in which you can stop a storm surge. So therefore, if Washington would be flooded, because it's a fairly low-lying area, what kind of things would you go through to get the government back up and running, you might say?
One of the things, when it comes to getting the government back up and running, we have the Office of Personnel Management that plays a major part in that. And what they try to do, along with other government agencies, is to sit down and look at the current situation and possible future situations. So if they determine that there's going to be major flooding, one of the changes that the federal government alone came with was, I don't remember the exact year, but we had a situation where, or you started to see where the federal government was shutting down quite often, as they do every year. We were also seeing things like where we had snowstorms, and they determined that there was a lot of work that was lost, basically, people who were sitting home. So what they looked at is options. So one of the major options they came up with is teleworking. So when it comes to flooding, there's certain agencies that are more vulnerable than others. They're in the flood zone. So what they've done then is develop a continuity program where they can assess and see what the situation is and what the situation may become, and make a decision. And often, or quite often, they've given employees the option to telework from home. So they started to develop and improve programs to help employees and organizations to continue their business as usual, even in a situation where you may have major flooding. So that's one of the things government agencies, not just FEMA, they've changed and developed is their continuity program, where they allow flexibility into allowing people to work from home. One of the things that the Office of Personnel Management will do is put out where they authorize unscheduled, leave, where people can take leave, because sometimes what we saw, especially what happened with Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, 90-something% of the employees were affected. So if you have a situation where you have employees themselves who are infected by the storm, they may not be able to make it and work and stuff. So we've developed programs to deal with that situation, to help them, to either give them leave, to authorize some agencies, or not just particularly FEMA, to authorize their personnel to telework from home to deal with something as simple as flooding, or I guess you couldn't call it simple, but to deal with that situation.
What can you transfer that into the situation where a private industry, they want to have an evaluation? Do you perform that type of thing, and what do you look for with them if you do?
Yes, we do. So as part of the National Continuity Program, one of the jobs, because there are several branches, that fall within the National Continuity Program. So one of them being like the FEMA branch, they actually go out, not just with federal, state, local, and tribal agencies, but even down to the private industries, to help develop plans to deal with when it comes to continuity. There's a little bit difference when it comes to continuity as it relates to the civilian side compared to federal, because when it comes to federal, there are federal mandates, and the bottom line for the federal government is still to provide a service to the public, whereas when it comes to business in the private sector, they're more focused on business continuity. So one of the key things is for the civilian sector is ensuring that they're still making revenue. So their continuity is more revenue driven.
Okay.
So ensuring that they're still able, or they're viable after the incident. So a great organization, or we call it the Waffle House standard. We would tell people, if you live in a particular neighborhood and you see that Waffle House is up and running, some people call it running joke, then you knew that that area wasn't particularly hit bad. But if Waffle House wasn't, because they actually do have a very excellent continuity program, then you may want to reconsider what's going on in that area, and reassessing what's happening in that area and stuff, because that's a great measuring stick. And same thing like with Walmart and a couple of other private companies out there. Some of them have very robust programs, but you also have to understand that when you're talking about someone like Walmart or Waffle House, they're located all throughout the country, so they may not need the help because they have a pretty robust program, but it's maybe the mama and papa stores and things like that where we can go out there and assist them. The other aspect of that is that FEMA has 10 regions, and we have regional continuity managers, so they can also assist, because each state in particular deals with a different disaster or event. Like out in California, they deal with wildfires, whereas in Florida, they may not deal with wildfires. They're going to deal more with flooding and hurricanes, and they will hardly ever see that out on the West Coast. It's just wildfires and, earthquakes. So it's also geared to each region.
Yeah. Do you actually go out then and discuss with people building safer housing and construction for hurricanes or for flooding or for the mass fires that are out there or earthquakes? Do you also consult with people about the way that they can build either their homes or their businesses?
Now, for the national continuity programs, we do not. That's a little bit more specific, but FEMA does have that capability. They do have constructional engineers that they can reach back to and get them. When it comes to that type of stuff, because of state mandates, so it's a little bit different than what I tell people, that, you know, the federal government doesn't really like to infringe on state rights.
Okay.
So each state may have different standards. So we particularly would go with someone in that particular state and at one of the regional offices, or the states may have those, you know, those people or whatever available. But when it comes to the national continuity program, we more so deal with the status of the federal government and then going out there and teaching, you know, continuity and how to write and develop continuity plans and things as such.
Well, what about NGOs? Do you include those NGOs into your planning with other people as well as with the federal government?
Yes, we do, because one of the things when it comes to FEMA and what we like to talk about, whether it's the national continuity programs or FEMA alone, is that, you know, the federal government has a responsibility, and I'll even say in particular FEMA, you know, FEMA has really 3 missions. And what people don't know is that our first mission is continuity of government. And with that, we can't do it by ourselves. It takes a whole community. So we've gone to the whole community concept, which includes federal government, state, local, and NGOs as well and stuff, because they play an important part in being prepared.
Okay. Now, here are the last question, because I really appreciate discussing this with you, and I'm glad that you phoned in, because even though we don't have your visual, the information is fantastic. These people are leaders. Hopefully, they'll be watching. We've had some very good success with these Leader Campus Voices. What do you think leaders should know about FEMA, and how can they get your assistance in advance if they want to look at some continuity type of programs?
Well, one of the things we say in FEMA is, you know, be FEMA flexible. I mean, I don't particularly want to get into, you know, the climate's changing or things along that line. But, you know, with what we're currently seeing, you know, whether it's man-made or natural, we know the earth is warming. You know, we're starting to see more and more storms and disasters that are affecting communities. So, you know, when it comes to leadership, you know, what we tell leaders is that, you know, they have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for the eventuality that things are going to get worse, and not, you know, at this particular time, going to get better. And, you know, I spent 25 years in the military prior to joining Homeland Security and FEMA. And one thing we always, you know, kind of pat ourselves on the back is that we plan. Now, not all plans went according to plan, but, you know, at least we have a plan. You know,
how much, if you get a warning for a hurricane such as I'm going to have the catwalk in front, the warning for such a hurricane as we've just seen in the past, how important is that pre-planning?
It's very important. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you look at the news, if you look at what's going on here lately, you'll see a lot of governors, you'll see a lot of local officials who are, you know, not taking any chances. You know, they're clearing their people out. And as a prime example, you know, the last hurricane we had, you know, we thought was going to hit Florida, you know, South Carolina, North Carolina, and luckily it pretty much stayed off, you know, and we didn't get the worst of it. But if you saw what the leaders were doing, they were evacuating their people, they were getting them out, you know, because at the end of the day, it's you know, I can deal with the hurricane or storms or flooding, you know, not actually going according, you know, to plan when it comes to worst case scenario. But if I don't make a decision, and as I mentioned back, you know, in my military days, that's just as worse, if not worse than, you know, not doing anything at all. So if you don't do anything, there's repercussions, and if you do things and stuff, there can also be repercussions. But I'd rather, you know, err on the side of caution and than not to do anything at all and stuff. So, and that's what we pretty much, you know, try to point out to leaders is, you know, make a decision, but, you know, do it in such a way whereas, you know, people understand that you have their best interests at heart and stuff, you know.
Well, I want to thank you very much for your insight, Barry. I appreciate greatly for you joining us on the Leader Campus Voices. So I want to say Barry Kinsey, FEMA National Continuity Training Manager. Thank you for your time and your insight, and I hope that that many of the leaders that watch this interview and listen to it will certainly take your warnings to heart and be prepared for the future.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Take care and good luck with the next one that comes along. Houston is rather hit hard, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I mean, that was a low pressure. That was just a low pressure that sat there. And then one thing I wanted to add is,
go ahead.
You know, what I had someone ask me, it was like, well, you know, we don't really have anything to prove scientifically, you know, whether it's climate change or anything. I said, yeah, you know, the weather's always changing. I said, however, we are seeing something. And regardless of, as I mentioned before, when you start to see warming, you know, on the magnitude that we're seeing, even just a 0.5%, you know, 1% change in our temperature causes more moisture to be in the air, and it has to go somewhere. And I think here in the future, if the temperature continues to go up, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see a lot more flooding. So this is just something that's, you know, coming. And that's why we always say in national continuities, you know, have a plan, have something, because it's bound to happen. And hopefully we can change it. We can do something about it. But at this point in time, the best thing you can do is have a plan.
Yeah. Well, we're here in Iowa, and we're on both sides. So we have the Missouri River in the west and the Mississippi River in the east, and there's quite a bit of flooding right along those lines. And so I think that the people of eastern and western Iowa should take your warnings to heart and definitely begin to pre-plan if they're not. I think that they are quite a bit from what I understand in the news.
Mm.
So thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Barry. Is there anything else you want to add? I usually give people a chance to say anything else because of the time. I'm not paying you or anything. So is there anything to add before you leave?
Yep. One last thing is also, you know, we have this statistic out there that, you know, I believe it's about 40% of the U.S. population can't afford any disaster or anything that's over $400. So we have to also do a better job in, you know, getting out to the public and stuff that we not only need to be prepared, we need to be financially prepared for situations. So hopefully, you know, we're getting that message out. And as I mentioned before, people are, you know, heeding our warnings and preparing for disasters and things like that. So, you know, other than that, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of FEMA National Continuity Program, and hopefully I get a chance to speak to you guys again.
Yeah, I hope so too. Maybe we can stay in touch, and in the future, maybe there'll be an opportunity to speak to you again about preparation for disasters. Barry Kinsey, FEMA National Continuity Training Manager, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.